One of the points of my research is to compare the manuscripts the one with the others. And there is the idea that comes from the history of research that all manuscripts were written by one single Christian community.
Okay, so Alexis, it's great to see you here by the Western Lake in Hangzhou. And I wanted to ask you, can you tell us about your research? What is it that you do, or what have you accomplished just recently?
I had an interest in religions on the Silk Roads, especially in Central Asia and in China, including Manichaeism, Christianity, Buddhism. And then I just finished a PhD on a group of texts named the Christian Dunhuang manuscripts, and including some manuscripts which are currently in Japan, in China, in France. And I studied their contents to study the way Christianity and the Chinese traditions get in contact and in dialogue, the one with the others. It was a very interesting topic for me as a Westerner to understand more Chinese culture and also to link it with my own culture.
Okay, so what did you find there when you dug deeper?
I dug deeper on two of these manuscripts that were thought to be inauthentic, and I dug on the fonts and the sources of these manuscripts to find some new elements that link them to the Syriac old traditions and the Sogdian theological content. So I found that these manuscripts are surely to be authentic. And then I studied their theology, which is very exotic when compared to Western theology. And that was my discovery.
Okay, and so can we access this
Yes,
dissertation?
The dissertation will be published on the 6th February.
Oh,
so
okay.
It's going to be available in all good libraries. You can find it on Amazon. I write in French because I'm French. So the title is Le christianisme chinois du Haut Moyen Âge. And you can maybe have a link. You can also find me on academia. If you have interest in those topics, you can get in touch with me. I would be happy to be in relation with you.
Okay, and so going back to the actual topic, why were those two manuscripts thought to be inauthentic before?
Because the vocabulary they use and the way they were discovered raised some natural questions about the possibility that there were some fakes made at the beginning of the 20th century. They were called to be found in Dunhuang, but we cannot trace back their origin. Then the vocabulary they use is different of the other Christian texts that were discovered, including the Stele of Xi'an. And so the idea was raised whether these manuscripts could have been written by some specialists to sell them at a high price to Japanese scholars who were visiting the Western regions.
And you found out this was not the case, so these are authentic?
My point of view is that it would be very difficult to be the case because the guy who wrote the manuscripts had to know Sogdian, for example, which is a language which fell in disuse after the 11th century. So it's very hard for a forger at the beginning of the 20th century to use some content and some vocabulary that come from that language. Then the content from a theological point of view goes back to some very ancient Syriac traditions that are not attested in China in the Christianity period that follow the 12th century. So it would have been very hard to invent such manuscripts.
Look, can you give us an example?
For example, they call the demon the name of Satan. And they say, well, they address to the audience and they say, well, everybody knows the name of the demon. His name is chamu. But okay. Chamu comes from Sogdian and it's a Sogdian transcription. So how could a forger know that? The first discovery of this name, for example, dates back to a scholar named Müller that made this first identification in 1912. So as the manuscript was first sold in 1917, it's very difficult for a forger to have the skill of knowing Sogdian and then to put it in an ancient text that uses all the characteristics of Dunhuang manuscripts.
Nice. And where does this chamu come from? Do you know? 'Cause it sounds like a very specific term.
It's something very common in Sogdian manuscripts, including Buddhistic ones, including Manichaean ones. It may come from a transcription of Sanskrit, but I'm not sure. Let's ask a better specialist than me.
Okay. Very, very interesting. I remember reading about those two manuscripts, the forged manuscript. And what about the Dunhuang Christian manuscripts? What did you find out about them? Anything new, exciting?
One of the points of my research is to compare the manuscripts the one with the others. And there is the idea that comes from the history of research that all manuscripts were written by one single Christian community. One of the points of my research is to raise in question this point of view, saying that they don't use the same vocabulary and sometimes they disagree the one with the others. So one of the questions at the conclusion of my PhD is to ask whether there could have been many different Christian communities that were not in communication the one with the others. We know, for example, that Buddhism came in China with different straits of texts and communities that didn't have communication the one with the others. So one of the points is that today we have 7 texts. I raised the question about the 7 texts if the 7 texts were written by the same community. And my point of view is that there may have been different communities in the West, in Chang'an, that didn't know each other and that expressed different identities and different theologies.
Okay, but that also means that these communities were coming into China at different times?
Yes, I think we can identify from historical sources at least 3 waves of immigrations that included some Christians. We know quite well the Sogdian Christians that came from Sogdiana in Central Asia. We also know well some Bactrian immigrants, including some Christians. We also know that the Persian court fled the Arab conquest of their country, and that some of them lived in Chang'an. So it makes at least 3 groups of people that included some Christians, but had different sociological backgrounds, sociological levels in the society. So it's possible that these Christians had different identities.
I see. And you mentioned the Sogdians quite a few times. Why are they so special in this story?
They are special because we know them better from historical sources, especially from many places where discoveries were made, including some tombs, some historical texts. And we know that these people came for business, came to migrate in China, had some colonies here, and they know that many of them had different religions, including Manichaeism and Christianity. Maybe one day we will know better the Bactrians and also know better the Persians. We know that some Persians lived in Chang'an, but we have very few historical sources. So the Sogdians are important because we can trace back some Sogdian philological origins in the text. But maybe one day with the development of research, we'll know other communities as well.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for having this discussion with me. And I see that the sun has just gone down behind you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Imre.
Yeah, bye.